This episode of the Construction Record is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association. Clean water, our goal, our future.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today for this very special podcast, my listeners. With me today, I have Mark Casaletto, President of ConstructConnect Canada's operations. He's been my boss now for 13 years, and I'm really happy to have him on here, though sad at the same time. Mark, welcome to the Construction Record.
It's my pleasure, Vince. Thank you for including me in this opportunity to have this conversation. It's awesome.
So what is this conversation about? Why do we have the president of ConstructConnect Canada's operations here? For those of you that know Mark and those of you that have only heard of him or maybe seen him speak, he's had quite the presence in our industry. And Mark is leaving the company. Today, when this podcast is released, is his last day with ConstructConnect Canada. And I thought it'd be great to have Mark on here and see what we can put on the record from our shared experiences over the last 13 years together. Mark has been with the company 15 years, but also just to talk about what he has seen in construction, the change that's come, and what he sees going forward. So Mark, are you ready to kind of explore some of those themes?
I can't wait, Vince, but we got 15 years to cover, so we gotta get going, I guess.
I guess so, right? As I joked during our green room conversation, some of you, our listeners, know I have the green room where we talk to the guests beforehand and share Skittles and Perrier and talk about what we're going to talk about. I remarked to Mark, it's like, how is it that here we are 13 years later, my hair is way grayer and shorter than when we met, but it still looks like he's fresh up, university. What's your secret?
The secret is something called COVID. Just let your hair go and do what it wants.
Sounds good. So really, people change jobs. They change chapters in their lives. For you, is it too much to say? This is significant. You've poured in a lot of time. I've seen it as a colleague, as someone that's worked beside you in the industry, and I've admired what you've done. What has really struck you as you've reflected on the last 15 years of your work with Construct and all the other names we've had during your tenure with us? What has struck you about this industry?
You know what, Vince? Well, let's. I guess I'll answer that question kind of in two parts. There's kind of an internal view, inside our company, and then the external view. On the external side, obviously, in 15 years, if you've been around this industry for a long time, and I've been in and out of this industry for the better part of the last almost 30 years. The last 15, and I would say even more so, the last 5 to 7, more has changed than any other time in my life in this space. There's been a lot of change, and the change is accelerating. It almost feels like more and more as the years go by. So, in the first 5 years from 2005 to 2010 or 12, it didn't change that much, but definitely changed a lot more relatively than prior years. But my gosh, a lot's changed in the last 5 years. Obviously, tech and digital innovation and the digitization of construction has been a big deal. So externally, a lot going on. And internally, man, you look at where we started, Vince, back 13 years ago when you started and 15 years ago, we, as you know, we got 2 distinct businesses and now 3. We got the legacy publishing business, we got the data analytics business, and we got software, which is kind of our new trajectory. And the publishing side of the business has evolved tremendously, and you've been at the epicenter of that, kind of leading it. And I couldn't have done it without you and the team, because there's been so much external pressure on publishing en masse, let alone our industry. But we've managed to kind of navigate it. We were probably given a little bit more slack than other publishing firms because of our history and legacy and trust and goodwill in the industry. But man, we have done a lot in 15 years to position the Daily Commercial News and the Journal of Commerce for another 100+ years of prosperity, because we had to have the responsibility of transforming the business out of this old paper world into this new digital world where audience acquisition is totally different. And we did that. And I think, you and the team especially should be very proud that we held the legacy of the DCN and JSC in our hand, and the future depended on us. Probably more than, I would argue, and I'm being biased, any other leadership team in the history of the business, because we caught the post financial crisis destruction of traditional publishing and media. A lot of businesses disappeared after that financial crisis. And the way people assume ROI on advertising and monetize newsrooms. So we had to figure out a new trajectory, and I'm very proud to say we did it. And thanks to you and the team for leading that effort and telling me what we should do. So I just had the easy part of saying, okay, here's the money.
Well, you did that part really well.
So that's that side of the business. And then there's the data side, which, that has evolved and changed over the years. Selling data, was a lot different 15 years ago, and analytics and that type of intelligence than it is now, And then there's the challenge of software and establishing software as a solution in the Canadian construction industry. And it's been quite the journey.
It is. I kind of feel like what we've done on those 3 tracks that you describe really mirror what's just happened in the industry organically, even before COVID, right? Yep. Like there was that push. There was once a time digitizing construction was all about just putting up PDFs. Right? And we have websites, but you think about those early days when you started, like stuff around takeoffs and plans room, very different environments than what we see now, correct?
Well, yeah, when I started with ConstructConnect back then, it was read construction data. The majority of documents were still being read in physical plan rooms. And 15 years later, plan rooms don't exist anymore. They've been completely digitized. As a matter of fact, they've gone a step further, and the documents now are embedded into a digitized construction workflow. So, a lot happened in 15 years. But if you think about it, we didn't have smartphones 15 years ago. Today we have smartphones. And, this time that I've had the absolute privilege of leading ConstructConnect Canada, if you look at the world, how much has changed in 15 years? We didn't have smartphones 15 years ago. Now we have smartphones. We didn't have 5G 15 years ago. Now we have 5G. We're consuming way more information. So the world was changing very quickly. The industry was changing very quickly, and we had to change a company. And we kept pace. In some cases, I think we got ahead of it a little bit and led the industry. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of being part of a team that had the faith in the company and me as a leader to be able to go on that journey. So.
Well, I've always thought one of the benefits we had as we embarked on this trajectory of growth and innovation is that we're from the industry. We're built from the industry as a company, from the DCN since 1927. You know what I mean? The JOC since 1911, right? Like we're from it. So that's why I always felt like we kind of had this inside track in trying to understand our audience, our clients, our people. And I always felt like I'd watch you work, and it's like, there's a bit more partnership talk here than I would expect from an outsider trying to bring innovation into the industry. Did you ever feel like that was something that you could rely on? The fact that we were from it when you're trying to deliver the change to it.
Well, one of the things I remember in 2005 when I started, and I had a little bit of advantage because when I came out of university, I started with Southern Construction Information Services, which was owned the Daily Commercial and the Journal of Commerce before Reed did. So there's a long journey with ownership changes and stuff. But so as a young kid out of school, I was immediately baptized into understanding that the DCN and JOC had a long history, had a long legacy, had a tremendous amount of connection and goodwill. So there was a path there. So when I came back as an older kid, but still probably a kid in mindset, but an older man, and to lead the business. Um, you know, I had the respect that I felt a responsibility to everybody that came before me who got the DCN and JOC to where it was. And it's not a straight line, right? Like, it's a
Mhm.
windy road. People do good things. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes things are out of your control. So we had a responsibility in 2005 to take this legacy, 1911 JOC, 1927
Mhm.
daily commercial news, data collection business that's been around since the 30s,
Mhm.
analytics and statistics in Canada since the 80s, and everybody associated with it, and actually strengthen it and grow it. And it was not a job; it was a responsibility,
Mhm.
because the industry relied on us, right? And so in integrating into the industry seemed natural because we were already part of the industry, um, and we just had to either rebuild bridges or strengthen them. And I think that was the focus early on, and it served us well.
Mm.
So
It has. You look back, a lot of initiatives, taken on, a lot of attempts at innovation. This is what I used to admire with some of our talks, where
yeah,
you were good with throwing stuff up against the wall and seeing if it sticks, to use that metaphor, like you were
yeah,
comfortable
yeah,
with that. Do
yeah,
you feel that it served us well, that approach, in the end? Like, there have been times there
yeah.
have been
You know what?
missteps, right? But
Well, when you're dealing with a business that's over 100 years old, that
mhm,
has a tremendous amount of history, and as you know, we have some really proud, long-serving, standing employees. Some of them have retired. Some of them are still with us. So a lot of history, a lot of perspective, a lot of pride, a lot of attachment to the products.
mhm,
And you have people in the industry who, have an expectation of the DCN. And the construction industry generally is not a big fan of change. So when you
mhm,
come into a business and say, we need to rethink some things, right? So, for example, one of the first real big monstrous decisions we made was the Daily Commercial News in 2005, 2006 was a newspaper. And the
mhm,
DCN website was just a login and a password to get to the newspaper if you're a subscriber. So the only way you can consume the news was to subscribe.
mhm.
And, we had to, I remember, and I think you were around at this time when these decisions were made.
Right.
We had to really think, and we were looking at what um, the big consumer publications like the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail,
Mm,
large multinational newspapers in the United States, what were they doing with their content? Because they were under the same threats we were. They were just much bigger.
right.
And we made the decision to liberate that editorial and take it from behind a firewall, put it in front of a firewall, and expose it to the world, because there was nothing like it in our industry. And I would argue nothing like it in North America and maybe the world. And it was a big decision. And a lot of people were nervous. Some people were angry. But I think it set us on a trajectory of innovation, because what we realized was it was all about audience, and that the bigger the audience, the more ability you have to monetize that content, because it was the best content in the industry. So that was probably one of the early decisions. And you know we took some risks, but I think it served us well. It set us down a path, and we never stopped innovating. We never stopped trying to challenge the norms. And I think that's why we were able to do what we did in 15 years.
Yeah, for sure. So, what would the Mark Casaletto of now tell that young buck Mark Casaletto who came back to be boss of, what I mean, the operations here in Canada 15 years ago? What's maybe one or two lessons you've learned now that you would love to tell the earlier version of yourself to remember as you embark on the journey?
Don't lose as much sleep as you did. I lost a lot of sleep in the early days because I was heavily, I felt an immense responsibility, like I said, to um, the legacy and the history of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce in Canada, and the data product, the people, and quite frankly, I didn't need to lose that much sleep, because I had really, really good people around me, and I had an incredible goodwill and product and service solution behind me. And even though I think in the early days, I probably had to convince people, look, we're going to take this dive. I always questioned myself. I did a lot more questioning of myself than I think I needed to, that I did a lot less later on. But I was younger and I was probably doing things that I never did. But I felt a tremendous responsibility. And that sense of responsibility never, ever left me. I feel it to
Mhm.
this day. I even feel it walking away from the business. I feel responsible for
Mhm.
everybody. I know people are outside the business or inside the business could be anxious because change is scary, just like it was when I started in 2005. But there's no need to lose sleep because, if you just be yourself and you trust your instincts and you have the faith of the people around you, you'll be okay. You'll be okay.
Mm. And that's good advice because there's been an authenticity to your leadership to give perspective to our listeners. This isn't all just about being a love-in. Those of you know, we tend not to cross on the construction record a lot of church and state. You know what I mean? But here,
Yeah,
church and state
yeah,
collides because, for perspective for the audience, when Mark really put his faith in me, when I noticed that he did allow me to have the keys to the car and kind of run with stuff. We were both, we would attend events, we'd attend CCA, but it was two different tracks, right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
But it was always the same goal. You know what I mean? It increased the brand exposure, strengthen our position, and you always kind of gave me the confidence to do that, and the team, and it extended, and it was always authentic. And I know that's what people are going to remember is there was always a genuine authenticity to you. When you would be presenting with Peter Hall at a CCA
yeah,
seminar, or whether we were talking at a Canada intro,
yeah,
that was an interesting part I kind of want to explore with you because I think about where you were at the beginning when I started with you. That was a part of your job that kind of grew. You know what I mean?
yeah,
The public speaking.
yeah,
Tell the
yeah.
readers about that. How was that for you from the beginning to how it is now? And I won't bring up the old tapes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know what? It's it's kind of funny because I kind of stumbled on that, right?
Right.
Because Alex Carrick has been like the oracle of the Canadian construction industry. He's been
Mhm.
our chief economist for over 30 years, and he is, a very sought after speaker with our customers and the industry, and the demands on him are great.
Mhm.
So it almost became like, Mark, can you kind of pinch hit for me on this one?
Mhm.
Um, and I did it, and I actually survived it, and I liked it.
Right.
And so it kind of went from there. So, I never, I kind of found my own rhythm with that, and it actually worked for me because when you enjoy something and you're passionate, and I love this industry so much,
Mhm.
and I really in a kind of I nerd out on it to the point where I watch the trends, in part because it's my job, but in part I just actually am really curious to see where the industry's going and how we ebb and flow relative to the economy and demographics. So I started just talking about this stuff as a leader, saying, look, I'm a leader like all of you,
Mhm.
and I just happen to work for a data company and an analytics company and a thought leadership company, and I have people around me who have their pulse on everything, and this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, and this is how I'm interpreting it. And I did it once, I did it twice, and 15 years later, I probably do it 10, 15 times a year. And I say no more than I say yes, and that's unfortunate, but that's how
Mhm.
it all evolved. And actually, in the next chapter of my life, not because I see it as an income opportunity, I
Mhm.
still want to speak. I still love this industry, and I still will track it, and I'll
Right.
still nerd out on it, and try to understand it, and try to predict where it's going to go. So
Mhm. And it is. It was interesting to see it enter your toolbox, to use the term, the metaphor of the industry, right? I think back to the early days, just like with anything.
yeah,
You think
yeah,
back to even I'm sure our editorial advisory board members, the longest standing ones. You know what I mean? Remember how awful I was at the beginning, you know what I mean, of our yearly meetings to now. But I remember your growth in that role. And I found that's something that the industry's come to expect of you. You know what I mean? It's like, Mark knows his stuff. Let's ask him. And I wonder what kind of
yeah.
pressure there was, what pressure you felt with that as it kept on going
Well,
forward.
there is pressure, but it's also an incredible honor. And like
Mm,
you kind of joke about how at the beginning with the EAB and working with the EAB, you screwed up,
mm,
and you never, Vince. I'm just telling you, you never screwed up. Like you think you screw up. The fact is, and I think we've talked about this in the past, and then maybe I've
mm,
given you this advice, and I give myself this advice, and people have
right.
just be yourself. You can't
Right.
go wrong by being yourself,
Hmm.
and that'll take you where it needs to take you. And
Right.
you know, whether I'm speaking to a 500 people, 20 people, a corporate AGM, internally to our own team, I just said to myself, this is who I am, um, you know, and this is what I know, and I'm not going to pretend to know anything I don't know, and let's just see where that takes me. And that's been my guiding light, right? And I think when I look at somebody like you, I think that's what you've done well for yourself. And there's a lot of people would just be authentic, and if you are who you are, and don't try to be anybody else, right? So
That's right. So let's circle back a bit to the current state of affairs with the business. So you did
yep,
let our listeners, kind of hear the fact that we're in another period now, right, where we got this third stream, the software stream of what we're becoming, our essence, right?
yep.
Um, how do you see that fitting with where the industry is right now? And also, where do you see kind of Canadian operations kind of sitting now with Construct Connect going forward, as you kind of start your next chapter?
Yeah, so I mean, the software is an incredibly exciting part of the business. It's been kind of, you know, in the US, the product development and innovation, extending that into the Canadian market, leveraging our leadership position, taking our data product, embedding it into uh, the digital pre-construction workflow, um, and just becoming much more than just a data provider,
Hmm.
becoming, you know, deep intelligence and providing tools to bring that data to life. I mean, I've been around for a while, and I got to tell you, this is the most exciting time to be in the data analytics and software space in our space, because of what some of the things Construct Connect are doing. So, you know, I was glad that I caught the tail end of it, or sorry, I was glad that I caught the beginning of it and was
Hmm.
able to have the keys to the bus to help bring it and establish it. And I'm excited about Construct Connect now taking it to the next level, because, you know, as much as this industry has worked in silos and has been hyper local, and those qualities will always be true, the entire workflow is becoming digitized, efficiencies and innovation and technology. And you're either going to be standing on the outside looking in, hoping to survive, or you're going to be in the middle of it. And I'm glad Construct Connect has decided to be in the middle of it. And
Hmm.
it's a good place to be. And I think we're well positioned in Canada to forge the next 110 years of our existence serving the industry. It's a good, strong foundation to do that. So,
It's true, and I hope you take pride in that. You know, because I think about all the different little storms and challenges in our time together. You know, there's been things that have tested this company, tested our operations, tested the industry. You know what I mean, as far as change, and it always feels like, there was always the strength and confidence in the product, no matter what it was. That we could deliver for the industry as a service to the industry. And
yeah,
that comes with challenges though too. There have been people that even now, 13 years later for me, people still don't like us. you know
yeah,
and they never
yeah,
will. How did you come to grips with that? Because I know of some of the battles. We're not going to all air our dirty laundry here on the construction record, but
yeah,
like, how did you come to deal with that? Because this industry is siloed, fragmented, and can be pretty mean. You know what I mean?
yeah.
When
You
it
know what?
wants to
Yeah,
be. You know.
you know what, Vince? And honestly, that's been probably would have been one of the most difficult things for me personally. And if I have a regret, that's a regret. Like,
Mm,
um, because at the end of the day, I always, on behalf of Construct Connect, wanted to build bridges and establish relationships and just do what we can as a for-profit organization in the
mhm,
construction industry, not just to, because I used to say this to everybody. I said it internally, I said it externally. We rely on a strong, healthy construction industry. And if we could play a part in helping make that industry strong and healthy, whether it be by building strong relationships with nonprofit associations, or building bridges, or being a thought leader, it wasn't just about, you know, earning wealth, because
mhm,
everybody's in the business of earning wealth and growing businesses. Of course we are, but we also have a duty to make the industry as healthy as possible and strong as possible, because we're all living in it. And I always felt responsible for that, right? So that's
mhm.
why I always encouraged everybody in the industry, and you know this because you were probably as externally visible as I was,
Mm-hmm.
but sit on committees,
Mm-hmm.
go to conferences, get involved, take an interest, and understand what's making this industry ebb and flow. And a lot of that was just by working with associations. And yeah, some didn't, some got frustrated with us, some got angry with us.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that it wasn't because we did something wrong. I think it was more. I think it was. I'd like to look back and think maybe we didn't do our job getting our point across, or the fit wasn't right. But we always tried to build bridges, always. And I hope we never stop. I hope we never stop, because I think it's really important. It's our role as a leader in the industry to always try to establish connections and make this industry a better place for everybody. It's a responsibility, and that's why I did what I did. And most of the time we succeeded, and sometimes we didn't. So,
But it's a good track record, though, my friend, and I hope you look back at it, and are proud. It's a,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
have you
I
had
am.
those
I am.
moments right now as you've been saying your goodbyes and stuff, right? To actually recognize it. Yeah.
The funny thing is, and I hope Michael Atkinson's listening to this, because he was a big part of our journey.
Yes.
But I remember when I started, and I was in my 30s when I started, and I was just keen and eager, and I knew that we had some fundamental challenges. We had burned a lot of bridges. The DCN and JOC was a little bit disconnected from the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Our business was disconnected from the industry, and there was a lot of goodwill that was kind of lacking back then, and we lost a little bit. And so I just went on the road and just started meeting leaders, whether they be private companies or association leaders. And the first place I went was to Ottawa, and I met Michael Atkinson and Pierre Boucher, and I said, listen, hi, my name's Mark Casaletto, and I am the new leader of at the time Reconstruction Data Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and I really want to get close to the industry. And they said, well, you got to get out and meet them, because we're just an oversight of the industry. Our member associations really kind of run themselves. So I hit the road and I went coast to coast, and I literally spent 3 months on the road meeting every association I could. And most of them were very pleasurable meetings, and were the beginnings of a fruitful relationship. Some of them were horrible meetings because there was a lot of anger towards us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got summoned back to Ottawa by Michael to say, what are you doing, man? Like, are you literally going to every association? Yeah, it's what I'm doing. You told me to do. And that started. And I said, that's what you told me to do. Anyway, so that started a wonderful relationship with the CCA that was, mutually beneficial for many years. And so, yeah, you know what? You're causing me to look back, but it's been, ebbs and flows and relationships, and we wouldn't have got there without them, right? So.
Oh, exactly. It's about the people. You know what I mean? This industry, we can talk about all the innovation and everything that has to happen, but the one thing you start to learn, it's simple to say, but it is about the people. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
about the guys on the tools and the guys in the boardrooms making those decisions, the site soups, the safety guys, right? Like, it only motors if the people are well equipped enough to motor with it, right? And I'm sure that it's just something that has been interesting for you to watch, because you've made
yeah,
relationships, right?
and that's Vince. You know what? That's the greatest gift, right? The
Yeah.
greatest gift of doing this for over a 15-year period are the connections you make. They start off as business relationships, but
Hmm.
I'm very proud and honored to be able to say that I've made a lot of really good friends as a result of my role, not just externally but internally. Like I don't look at these as like employee relationships, or business relationships. Okay, goodbye. I'm moving on to the next. These are my friends now. Like I consider a lot of people in this industry friends, and it's a great gift, and I'm very thankful for that. So.
Yeah. Well, just before we let off, I'll share the anecdote. I shared it with you privately, but I kind of remember the tipping
Yeah.
points of our relationship. It's a little one. It's not a big tipping point. We had attended like an event. I can't remember what exactly we were doing, but we were hosting people of the industry at the Rogers Center baseball game. It was a night
Yep.
game, ends, and somehow you and I end up together in the bowels of the dome, well, the Rogers Center, walking our way out, trying to get around. And And I'd only been with the company at that point about a year and a half, 2 years, and so I didn't know exactly where you were coming from, really, when you talked content and what the DCN
Yeah.
meant, right? And I still remember that conversation. We're walking around the dome, looking up at the tower, just chatting, right? And I remember, I'm back to the word I used before, the authenticity and the genuine nature of you is, and I remember listening to you and talking to you and your vision. And I can't remember what my early vision was when I came here, what I hoped to accomplish with the DCN. And I'm like, you know what? This guy's got it. He's got a decent plan. Maybe I will hang around. Right. And I'm so happy we got lost walking around. I don't even expect you to remember this story, but it was just so weird for two Toronto guys to get lost walking out of that place. Right. But
the Jays probably lost and we were pissed off. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the few teams we have in common. So, for folks to know, it's like maybe if we still had, if we were in the office, I'd be looking forward to decorating my editorial team's walls in Montreal Canadian colors now. Because Mark,
go at it.
I can go at it now and not worry about getting fired. Right. So.
Yeah, it's probably the one part of my job where I abused my power and I had to create a policy that there would be no Montreal Canadian paraphernalia in the office. So, yeah.
And yet we endured. And here we are.
No, it's funny you bring up that point, Vince. I mean, I don't honestly. I don't quite remember. I kind of remember it, but I've had a few concussions in my life. So get on it. But
right.
I think what it talks to, and I talked to the Canadian team kind of in my last message to them, and my dad used to say to me, never take for granted the moments that you don't realize where you are having an impact on somebody's life, whether it's only one meeting or whether it's a lifetime relationship, and never take for granted the moments that they have on you. Because you're a function of the people you meet along the way. So those little moments you talked about, that one moment, if that had an impact on you, honestly, that is the greatest legacy that I could ever have. If I had that kind of impact on you in that moment, that makes me extremely proud, because I can tell you that whether it's you, and definitely you, because obviously we've done a lot of things together over the years, or the broader employee base, or our colleagues in the United States, or the industry, a lot of people have had a lot of impact on me, and I'm a much better person today for having gone through that journey and made those connections and had those conversations than I would have otherwise. So I'm greatly thankful for that. So
for sure. And not to be egotistical enough to speak on behalf of the industry, but I'll speak on behalf of our audience and our listeners and our readers. We thank you. You know what I mean? It's your vision and drive, Mark, help position us to a place where there's a lot of success we've enjoyed, and you've given us the ability to do that. And now Construct, I'm sure, is going to continue that legacy that you've helped build over this last bit of time. So, you know what I mean? I wish you the best, my friend, in your next chapters. It's really been a pleasure.
I will be somewhere in the industry, because I plan to stay active. And I mean, I've left this industry twice. I don't think I'm leaving it again. So I'm here to stay, but I'm not sure where the wind's going to blow me next. But I will say this, wherever I land, I will be rooting for you guys. And I'll be your biggest fan. So.
I appreciate that, Mark. Definitely. And we'll be behind you 100%. So thank you so much.
Vince.
No, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to reflect.
Yeah, definitely, and thank you for sharing as you did. And for our listeners, if you want to learn a bit more about Mark's thoughts as he kind of exits his time here with us at ConstructConnect Canada, there was a Q&A that was published on Thursday in the DCN and the Daily Commercial News and the Journal of Commerce that you could read on our website at dcnonl.com or joconl.com. We'll make sure to link it in the episode notes here for this podcast. And if you have anything you want to share about Mark, good, bad, or indifferent, feel free to email us or put it in the comments section, and we'll make sure to share it with them. So
I'm worried. There's a lot of off-the-record content that a lot of people have over 15 years. So I'm curious to see what shows up.
Well, I've behaved up until this point. I haven't even hinted at some of the stuff that we've done and seen. So,
That's awesome.
but all the same, I thank you so much for everything, Mark. It's really been a pleasure, and it's been fun to call you both boss, colleague, coworker, and friend. So thank you.
Likewise, Vince. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone.
This episode of the Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.